This is Christian Gomez with the New American Magazine, and today's top headline is entitled, Notre Dame Survived, How About Christian Europe? Written by C. Mitchell Shaw. And today with us we have the author of that piece, Mitchell Shaw. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Glad to be here, Christian. Thanks for having me.
So this has obviously been a horrific fire that has engulfed and destroyed much of the cathedral. As we saw, the spire went down with the fire and destroyed a lot of the historical structure of the cathedral. It's a tragic day for French Christians, French Catholics, the French people as a whole, and the world for losing a monument not just to Christianity, but also a monument of Western civilization as well. So in your article, Mitch, you discuss the historical significance of the cathedral, and you go through some of its history. Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of the cathedral and some of that history right now here with us?
Yeah, sure. So construction of the cathedral began in 1160 and was completed mostly by about 1260. So it took them about 100 years, meaning that there would have been craftsmen who spent their entire working lives, perhaps generations of craftsmen who spent their entire working lives building that cathedral as a work to God, to build this place of worship for the honor of God. And of course, all of this dates back, as I point out in the article, to the conversion of the Franks in, I think it was 504. I don't have the date right in front of me, but Easter Day, I think it was 504. With
508.
508, thank you, with the conversion of Clovis. And at that point, France becomes the first sort of Christian nation, as a nation, to say, this is our identity, this is who we are. So the cathedral being built, these hundreds of years later is a direct reflection on sort of the Christian identity and the way France saw herself as a Christian nation. So then there've been coronations, including Bonaparte. In fact, what I didn't get into in the article was Bonaparte had actually been civilly married before becoming emperor, and then wanted to be coronated as king in the cathedral. So he had returned control of the cathedral after the French Revolution back to the Catholic Church so that the renovations could be done and he could be coronated there. But then he was also religiously married after his civil marriage in the cathedral. So he was married in the cathedral. He was coronated in the cathedral. And then, there have been royal weddings and other coronations. It's the bells, particularly the main bell, which is named Emmanuel, has been rung at every major event in France for hundreds of years, including the ends of both world wars, and in solidarity with the United States, after the 9/11 attacks, they rung Emmanuel to express their sorrow for what we were going through. So, there's a sense of returning the favor now, in that I think I can't remember exactly who, but one French commentator referred to this as France's 9/11.
Now, what would be the closest example of this in the United States in terms of the significance of what the cathedral meant to France? What in America do we have that's like this?
Yeah, really nothing. I remember years ago, I was living in Columbus, Ohio, and I was talking to a guy who has traveled all around the world, and he said, "Mitch, you really don't have an understanding of how young America is until you travel to Europe and stand in a building that was hundreds of years old when Christopher Columbus discovered what is now America." And the cathedral is exactly that. It's 850. It's more than 850 years old. It's a symbol of their religious identity. In America, we don't have anything like that. The closest we probably have is the Statue of Liberty, which, sadly was modeled after Mary Ann, the goddess of liberty, in the French Revolution. So, 9/11, perhaps is a good indication, because sadly in America, commerce is sort of our most important thing, and 9/11 struck us, in our commerce. So, maybe, but I don't think we really have anything that compares on a one-to-one, like on par with the cathedral for France. We can't really identify with this.
And of course, the cathedral, as you pointed out, with its age, obviously predates the Eiffel Tower, and it actually In terms of tourism, it is the most visited site in all of France, more so than the Louvre, more so than the Eiffel
Yeah.
Tower. Sort of a symbol of the country in its identity of who France is historically as a nation, going back to the conversion of Clovis. So it's a tragic loss for France indeed. Now, you mentioned also in your article, especially in your article, you discussed the French Revolution. So what happened during that period? Was that not a period of sort of desecration of the
Oh,
cathedral even then?
it was indeed a period of desecration. So there are some sort of almost what would be comical scenes if they weren't so dark. For instance, the revolutionaries beheading all of these biblical kings, the statues of all these biblical kings, because in their ignorance they mistook them for French kings.
So like
So
King
they
David or King Solomon of Israel?
Absolutely. So they behead these statues as sort of this symbolic, down with the monarchy, because it's important to remember that the French Revolution really only had two targets, and those would be altars and thrones. They wanted to overthrow religion and they wanted to overthrow the monarchy, both of which they hated and saw as oppressive. So, having done that, now they seize control of the cathedral, and because there was schism even within the revolution, it's funny that people who revolt don't see eye to eye, so they revolt then against one another and commit suicide in a sense. But in the midst of all of that, at one point, it was a shrine or a church for an atheist cult,
The
and
cult of
then at
reason, I
an
think you
the
described
cult
it.
of reason,
Cult of
that's
reason.
right. And then that was almost immediately supplanted by the cult to the supreme being, which was a deist cult within the revolutionary ranks. In the midst of all of that, it was also used as a warehouse. So, taking these things of God and using them for just normal, everyday, or and put it in religious terms, and profane purposes, it is an absolute desecration. The smaller bells, most of the smaller bronze bells were smelted down to be converted into cannon and used
Mm.
by the revolutionaries. The lead roof was stripped of its lead to make bullets for the revolution. So they just saw these things of God, these things that had stood for, even by that point, hundreds of years, as just something to use for their revolution. Every statue was destroyed, uh, minus one statue of the Virgin Mary outside the cloister. And the only reason it was saved, most likely, is because they just simply co-opted her as the goddess of liberty, as I mentioned earlier. So Mary Ann, the goddess of liberty, and that would have been part of their sort of thinking.
Well, as all of Europe is coming together, especially all of France and others from around the world, to help rededicate, to restore sort of the cathedral back to the condition it was in, would you say that the loss of the cathedral, or most of the cathedral that was lost, that is symbolic of how Christianity is sort of seen as waning in Europe with the rise of secularism, atheism, humanism, and also the migration of Islam? Um,
Yeah, yeah. So the cathedral is often called a symbol of Christianity in France and across Europe, and I would add to that around the world, because I think the world, with the exception of now reports are showing, certain Islamic groups celebrating the near destruction of the cathedral, but I think most of the world watched in shock and pain as the cathedral burned, because it is a symbol of Christianity. Again, France is the first Christian nation, and this was their big cathedrals. Is thank God still their big cathedral, and so if that symbolism plays forward, and I don't think I'm taking any great liberties here, we play that symbolism forward, then what we see is if the cathedral itself is a symbol of Christianity in France, I think it's noteworthy that sort of traditionally, the tallest building in any city would have been the church. So until the construction of the Eiffel Tower, there was nothing in France taller than the spire of Notre Dame. But so again, moving into that secularist sort of way of thinking, now they attempt at least to make their great symbol the Eiffel Tower. and erect it higher than the spire, which is just sort of a way of supplanting the value of the church, the value of religion, and the
Exactly.
worship of God. And so, again, now carrying that on forward, so what I see in the fire is sort of a symbol. The cathedral survived the Napoleonic Wars, and before that, the French Revolution, and before that, assaults by kings who just wanted to strip it of its wealth. It survived World War I. It survived World War II. And this fire is much like that, this sort of destructive force. So I see in the fire sort of a symbol of the hatred of the world for Christianity and the hatred of secularism. And that's what I guess I mean by the world for Christianity. And again, secularism in one form or another, hatred of God in one form or another, has been trying and failing for 2,000 years to destroy Christianity. Hasn't happened, isn't going to happen, thank God. And so, in the sort of destruction or near destruction of the cathedral, I do see a parallel. But the happy note, at least for the moment, because I do remember in the days after 9/11, I remember seeing American flags on almost every doorstep. And then those American flag bumper stickers that people stuck, the magnetic bumper stickers in the shape and colors of the American flag that people were putting on the backs of their cars. And I remember churches were very, very populated in the weeks after 9/11. But flash forward a few months after 9/11, and every time I went into a car wash, one of the doors outside the car wash would have 13 of those stickers on it, where people just drove through the car wash and the magnetic sticker would fall off and somebody would stick it up on the door. All the American flags were either gone or tattered on my neighbor's doorsteps, and churches were less populated. So I'm hopeful, though, that what we saw, even as the fire was burning, with Parisians overflowing the streets, kneeling and praying and singing hymns, burning candles, asking God to help them through this and to save the cathedral. And God faithfully answered those simple, faithful prayers. My hope is that the French people will remember that and move forward with that.
Amen, absolutely. Well, as Europe continues to come together and France comes together and the world as well comes together, Lord willing, the cathedral will be rebuilt quickly rather than taking the decades and centuries it took to build it the first time around. Well, that's all the time we have today on the program. Thank you for joining us today, Mitchell. And those of you watching out there on YouTube, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the New American channel if you have not already done so, and share this video with your friends. Thank you, and God bless.